We cross now to SABC correspondent Laura Makin-Isherwood, who's in London. Laura, I can only imagine that the United Kingdom at this time is in shock. She was 96. She had been frail for some time, but still probably when the news came through, many people who've only ever known her as Queen, shocked by the news.
Yes, and I mean, everybody knew that she was 96 years old, but the last time that we saw a photograph of her was only on Tuesday when she was welcoming in the new Prime Minister here, Liz Truss. We saw her stood up, she had her walking stick and she was leaning on it, but she was smiling and she seemed very happy, very content there. And despite some markings on her hands that were looking a little bruised, there wasn't really any other indication other than her, as you say, looking slightly frail, that this might be on the horizon. But clearly something changed in the last 2 days or so that has led to this passing of Her Majesty the Queen. And we knew that something wasn't quite right yesterday when it was announced that she wouldn't be attending a virtual meeting of Privy Councillors, so councillors associated with the government that had been planned. It was decided that she needed to rest. And then today, of course, we got that message from Buckingham Palace, that statement saying that doctors were concerned for her health. And then everything that followed with her family travelling up to Scotland to Balmoral Castle to be with her.
And it is unusual, isn't it, to get this statement from the palace about the state of the Queen's health. This isn't something that they do, and perhaps that was almost kind of starting to give us an idea of just how serious the situation was.
Yeah, it certainly felt like a little bit of a warning. And there was definitely those rumblings in Parliament as well here in the United Kingdom. The new Prime Minister was delivering what was going to be her first big announcement of her term as Prime Minister, an energy cap on household energy bills. And then there was this rustling and movement among the benches as MPs were passed notes towards their respective party leaders, basically informing them of this statement that Buckingham Palace had put out. We then heard from Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons. He read out that statement, offered best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen and, of course, the rest of the royal family. And then things seemed to happen quite quickly. We saw the pictures of the jet that flew into Aberdeen Airport that was carrying Prince William, Prince Edward, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward's wife, Sophie, the Countess of Wessex. They were seen coming off that jet, getting into a Land Rover with Prince William driving the four of them over to Balmoral Castle. And the photographs that came out of the back of that car showed Sophie, the Countess of Wessex, and Prince Edward looking quite sombre, staring straight ahead. And it definitely gave that feeling that something was imminent. And then quite soon after, of course, we got that statement from Buckingham Palace saying that the Queen had passed away.
Has the palace announced the time of her passing yet?
No, they've just said this evening. There's been no definite information given around the reason for her death or any real details about that. It's unlikely that we will get any. All that we've had so far is information about the new King Charles III, His Majesty, who will stay at Balmoral Castle tonight, and then he'll travel down to London tomorrow by train. We then will wait effectively for the Queen's body to be transported back to London. It's likely that that will happen on a train as well. But if that's not possible to do, then it will be flown back to London, received by members of the royal family and also members of Parliament as well. And then it goes into this pre-planned event schedule, basically, for the next 10 days that leads up to the state funeral. That will happen at Westminster Abbey. 2 minutes silence will be held at midday here, and everybody will be then passing an era in British history and moving into a new one with King Charles III on the throne.
I can only imagine, because we saw earlier already, even before the announcement, that people were already starting to gather around Buckingham Palace. So probably now there's thousands of people making their way to the palace, Windsor Castle probably, and leaving flowers and wreaths maybe?
Yes, absolutely. And you're right, the crowds were really growing over the afternoon, such that when the traditional easel was set out with the notice announcing formally Her Majesty the Queen's death, there were so many people there, all wanting to see it with their own eyes effectively and be a part of this momentous moment in history. We've got a bit of an idea, of course, given that the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen's husband, Prince Philip, passed away recently and through the pandemic, and we saw the great outpouring of grief that we felt then from the public and the messages of condolence that came from around the world. For Her Majesty the Queen, it will be on an even larger scale, of course. The sheer weight of feeling that is likely to flood from countries in the Commonwealth in particular is likely to be huge. There are already messages of condolence coming from leaders, prime ministers, presidents from around the world. And of course, it will be a full state funeral. So there will be processions going through London. There will be, of course, people going to sign books of condolence, books of remembrance, and as you say, leave flowers and messages for her. Because for many people in the United Kingdom, she is the only monarch we've known. She is 96 years of age. She's been on the throne for 70 years. And for the majority of the population, the Queen has always been the Queen. And so this shift towards King Charles III will be a really significant part of everybody's lives.
Most people don't have a memory of when her father died and what happens, but what do you see happening for the next 10 days before the funeral?
No, they don't have a memory of it. And it's important to remember as well that actually Queen Elizabeth II was never supposed to be queen. It was because of her uncle's abdication that she then was put in line to the throne, and she's taken on this role with a sense of real duty, respect. It has been her life's work, and she's done it quietly, steadfastly, attending hundreds and thousands of engagements every year, and then also supporting charities as well. When it comes to the formalities of the next 10 days, we will see, as I said, the coffin and her body returned to London from Scotland. That will happen in 2 days' time. We will then see a series of events that take place. There will be rehearsals, of course, that have taken place with the military for various processions. And also dignitaries and representatives from nations around the world will start flying into London in preparation for this funeral. So it's likely that given her status as the head of the Commonwealth, there will be leaders, representatives from all Commonwealth countries heading towards London to pay their respects to the Queen, and also, of course, to welcome in the new King Charles III.
Will we hear from King Charles III in this period, or is that some time away?
Well, he has issued a statement saying that he will return back to London tomorrow. He's going to spend the evening at Balmoral Castle tonight. We'll then hear, once he's returned to London, pretty much a ceremony that will take place at St James's Palace with dignitaries, with politicians and those members of Parliament and the royal household that are significant when it comes to basically confirming King Charles III as the new king. So it's likely that we will hear something from him. It's understood there may be some sort of televised statement. It's not clear yet when that might be. And if he is at Balmoral Castle tonight, it could be later on this evening, or maybe he will wait until he returns to London and has that official ceremony confirming him as king. At the moment, things are very fluid. We weren't necessarily expecting an announcement this evening, so it's really not clear at this point in time exactly what we're going to hear and from who and from when.
I know you're a journalist and your job is to tell the story, but having grown up in the UK with the Queen, perhaps your own personal thoughts and reflections of what's happened today.
Well, yeah, she is all that I've ever known as a monarch. So it's a very interesting time to be in the United Kingdom, basically talking to friends and family, and all of them saying that this feels like a very sad time. It's definitely a poignant moment, the passing of an era, as I said. And a lot of people might have actually been able to catch a glimpse of Her Majesty the Queen. She did so many engagements out in the public, working with charities, that the majority of people will have had at least an opportunity to go to a town or an area where she might have been passing through. For me personally, she came to my hometown down in Cornwall in the southwest of England when I was probably about 6 or 7. And I remember just being desperate to just catch a glimpse of her as she passed through. It was actually the Duke of Edinburgh that actually spoke to me and my friend that day, but I did see her and he passed on some flowers that I had taken for her. And then the final time that we saw her, of course, was at the Jubilee in person, but then also at the Royal Windsor Horse Show. She had a real passion for animals. She liked her dogs, of course, but also horses, and she was a real expert in that. And so even though she was taking a step back from the front line of that royal duty and those amount of diary appointments that she had, she still made it down to the Royal Windsor Horse Show in her Land Rover with her personal protection officer to see her own horses basically display and perform and compete in this show. So she had her own passions, her own personality, and I think that will be missed, as well, of course, as her stability and strength as the monarch.
Yeah, and many memories over time. Sports events, as you mentioned, but many difficult times as well, where she stood up and was Queen of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. She obviously experienced the war, of course, here, World War II. She came into public life and became the monarch at a very turbulent time. She's seen recessions, depressions, and of course now is no easy time in the United Kingdom. We've had, of course, this move away from the European Union, a real reassemblance and repositioning of the United Kingdom in terms of the intergovernmental and international political spectrum as well, with the ongoing issues in Ukraine. And so she has witnessed absolutely swathes of important moments in history, and her understanding and her knowledge will surely be missed as well, not just within the royal family and that understanding, but also that recognition of what the public has dealt with over the last few decades. And so it's a very interesting time, but also, of course, a really sad one.
Laura, that's where we'll leave it. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and giving us an update there. That's our correspondent in London, Laura Makin-Isherwood, sharing partly her memories and her thoughts of meeting the late Queen, and also just how significant she has been for Britain and Britons, as well as the Commonwealth.